Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to take you to a place that perhaps few have ever imagined could exist right in the heart of Los Angeles. Amid a city of giant movie billboards, lavish parties, and the dazzling lights of Hollywood, there lies a place called Skid Row. Here, just a few blocks away from glamorous boulevards, thousands of people live in tattered tents, surrounded by the smell of garbage, the blare of car horns, and the cold sting of neglect. Skid Row is the raw paradox of modern America. In the middle of prosperity exists an island of poverty, where the divide between rich and poor gapes like a deep crack in the heart of the city. When people think of Los Angeles, they often picture long stretches of beach, famous celebrities, and lights that never go out. But hidden behind that glamorous curtain is a harsh reality. Skid Row, where thousands fight every single day to survive in scarcity, insecurity, and oblivion. So, what is really happening here? Today, I'm not taking you to bustling neighborhoods. Instead, we'll walk through streets cloaked in shadows, listen to the whispers of lives lived on the edge, and explore the homelessness crisis in Skid Row, a story the world has, for far too long, avoided facing. From above, Skid Row appears as just a small gray patch nestled among Los Angeles's towering buildings, a city known for wealth, bright lights, and endless parties. But when you set foot here, all those sparkling images vanish. You no longer see brightly lit shopping centers or hear the lively music of upscale bars. Instead, you hear the rattle of cartwheels over cracked pavement, the flutter of plastic tarps in the wind, and the musty odor seeping from piles of garbage left uncollected. Skid Row spans only a few dozen city blocks, yet each night it becomes home to more than 5,000 people. They sleep under tangled sheets of tarpaulin at intersections, beneath bridges, or in pitch-dark abandoned parking structures. The makeshift tents are built from materials others have thrown away: rotting planks, bent metal rods, ripped tarps, all pieced together into a shelter as fragile as the lives inside. One strong gust of wind or heavy rain could erase their entire home. The contrast here is painfully sharp. Just a few streets away, luxury apartments with glass balconies open to sweeping city views, their lights glowing every night. Fine dinners are served in upscale restaurants, while in Skid Row, a meal might be nothing more than a dry sandwich handed out by a passing volunteer group. Life here is stripped of the protection of law or basic public services. No electricity, no clean water, no sanitation. Residents live beside heaps of rotting trash baking in the sun, streams of dirty water flowing from sewers, and the constant threat from other desperate people struggling to survive. In Skid Row, when night falls, danger doubles. The quiet footsteps behind you could belong to a friend searching for a place to sleep, or a thief looking for an opportunity. Clean water, something the wealthy never think twice about, is a matter of life and death here. Only a few public taps serve thousands, and the water quality is rarely safe. Many resort to unsafe sources, leading to skin diseases, intestinal illnesses, and other health problems becoming a part of daily life. With no insurance and no way to pay hospital bills, people must rely on mobile clinics run by charities, which themselves can only operate a few hours a week. And yet, the greatest paradox is this: Skid Row is not an abandoned wasteland. It is home, in the truest sense, for thousands. Here, people have neighbors whose names they know, unspoken rules for living together, stories shared over a paper cup of coffee in the morning, and moments of sharing a thin blanket when the night grows cold. Harsh as it is, Skid Row is the only place where they can feel even a small sense of belonging until a real opportunity comes along, if it ever does. For many, this is not the final destination, but merely an involuntary stop on a journey that life has pushed into aimlessness. Yet for many others, Skid Row is where they will live and die. Among the tarp walls, filthy sidewalks, and the distant blare of car horns, each passing day here is a silent battle, a fight to hold on to dignity, to find a reason to keep going when the rest of the world seems to have forgotten they exist. Skid Row is not just a name on the map of Los Angeles. It is a throbbing scar, a constant reminder that even in the wealthiest cities, there are still places where people are pushed to the margins, living in the shadows of the very society they belong to. And until we face this truth instead of avoiding it, Skid Row will continue to exist as a quiet yet powerful indictment against us all. If hunger can be momentarily eased with a loaf of bread from a kind stranger, thirst in Skid Row is another story, lingering, gnawing, and at times making the struggle to survive even harder than ever. Here, clean water is not something you can simply turn on at a tap and fill a glass with. An entire area with thousands of people has only a few public water points, temporary faucets attached to walls or iron poles, often discolored with rust. Every morning, long lines of people wait, clutching plastic bottles and reused jerry cans from somewhere else. The water trickles out weakly, sometimes with a metallic smell or a strange taste. No one is sure if it's truly safe, but in Skid Row, thirst is a ruthless driver, forcing people to drink even when they know illness lurks in every sip. There is no proper drainage or enough public toilets for such a dense population. Narrow alleys and sidewalks sometimes become the place to relieve oneself, leaving the air thick with stench that clings to every breath. When it rains, filthy water mixes with trash and human waste, flooding everywhere and turning entire streets into toxic streams. In such an environment, disease spreads as an inevitable consequence. Persistent coughs from inhaling smoke and dust from cars and tent fires. Red, burning patches of skin that ulcerate from untreated minor wounds. Stomach cramps after drinking unsafe water. These are not rare cases, they are the daily rhythm of life here. And when illness strikes, treatment options are almost non-existent. No health insurance, no money to step through a hospital's doors. Many endure the pain, hoping their bodies will recover on their own. Some turn to mobile clinics run by charities, where a few volunteer doctors and nurses work tirelessly to examine dozens, even hundreds, of patients in a single day. They hand out painkillers, antibiotics, and bandages, but resources are always limited, and each patient's time is measured in minutes. Some arrive too late. A wound that could have been closed with a few stitches turns into a severe infection. A lingering cold becomes pneumonia. In Skid Row, illnesses that elsewhere are easily cured can become a death sentence. The harshness here lies not only in the lack of medical resources, but in the feeling of being utterly abandoned. In a wealthy city where people can spend hundreds of dollars on a single dinner, just a few blocks away, there are those forced to choose between drinking dirty water or enduring thirst, between letting illness ravage them or quietly lying down to die without ever getting a ticket into a hospital. If thirst and hunger are daily torments in Skid Row, addiction is the slow-moving storm sweeping through every street. Heroin, fentanyl. Names that might seem distant to most people are as common here as a part of everyday life. Drugs find their way into Skid Row as easily as wind slips through the gaps in a torn tent. For just a few crumpled bills, small bags of white powder or tiny pills can change hands in the shadows of a street corner. The problem lies not only in how easy access is, but in the severe lack of rehabilitation programs. Some have tried to seek help, but the waiting lists are too long or the procedures too complicated. Many give up, sinking deeper into the vicious cycle of addiction, homelessness, addiction. They suffer not only from the erosion of their physical health, but also from severe psychological damage, developing anxiety disorders, depression, and even losing their sense of time and self. And when despair becomes the environment you live in, violence also takes root. In Skid Row, conflicts can erupt over something as small as a cigarette, a spot to sleep under an awning, or a bag of food being handed out. Theft happens as a reflex for survival. Some robberies take place quietly under the cover of darkness. Others explode into open brawls in broad daylight in front of everyone. With little oversight or regulation, the rules in Skid Row are almost written by instinct. Groups of homeless people gather into their own territories, sometimes against each other, sometimes uniting to defend against outside threats. In this tense atmosphere, fear becomes a constant companion. Residents here sleep with a folding knife or a stick by their side, and not to attack, but to protect themselves. In Skid Row, each day of survival is a small victory, but also a bitter reminder that addiction, violence, and poverty are bound together like a knot that is not easily undone. And until that knot is cut, these streets will remain submerged in a reality full of darkness. To understand why Skid Row exists and has lasted for decades, we must look at the root of the problem, and much of it begins with something that sounds simple: housing. In Los Angeles, housing prices have been climbing without pause, and Skid Row is no exception. In fact, The land around here is being turned by investors into upscale projects, with million-dollar apartments, luxury hotels, and grand entertainment complexes. But alongside these magnificent developments, there is still nowhere near enough affordable housing for low-income people. With average rents far beyond their means, thousands lose their homes, get pushed out of stable living situations, and eventually find their way to Skid Row, the only place they can set up a temporary spot to sleep without being immediately driven away. The second cause, and perhaps the more painful one, is the failure of housing and welfare policies. For years, city and state authorities have tried various measures, but most have been temporary, clearing out tent encampments, relocating homeless people from central areas, or opening a few more short-term shelters. These campaigns may make the streets look cleaner for a few weeks, but it's like sweeping dust under the rug. The root problem remains. Millions of dollars have been spent, but without a long-term strategy. Money flows into Skid Row like water into sand. Without a sustainable housing system, without a plan to help homeless people reintegrate, the cycle of losing your home, ending up in Skid Row living in instability, simply continues. Some policies have even unintentionally made the problem worse. When central land is cleaned to make way for new developments, those who had been living there temporarily are pushed into other areas, expanding the crisis's reach. Skid Row is not only the result of poverty, but also the consequence of policy gaps where delay, lack of resolve, and lack of fairness have left a wound that refuses to heal in the heart of Los Angeles. Amid the streets lined with tattered tents, the smell of garbage, and the echo of car horns, there are still sparks of humanity. Skid Row, for all its harshness, is not entirely a dead zone for emotion. Here, people learn to rely on one another to survive. On cold mornings, a woman walks the street, handing out hot coffee and paper cups to her neighbors. On certain evenings, a few men gather to play an old guitar, the raspy music drifting into the night wind, momentarily drowning out the weary noise of the city. And on some days, when someone falls gravely ill, the whole encampment pitches in whatever little money they have to buy medicine, or simply sits beside them so they won't have to face the end alone. The sense of community in Skid Row isn't written on paper, nor is it commanded by anyone. It exists naturally, like a survival instinct, sharing food, passing along blankets, keeping watch over one another while sleeping. In an environment lacking almost everything, human connection becomes the most precious asset. Charities and volunteer groups are also the lifeblood that keeps Skid Row going. They bring food, clean water, clothing, and sometimes free medical care. Some even run skills classes, addiction recovery programs, or vocational training so that homeless individuals have a chance to regain a stable life. However, their resources are limited, and the number of people in need always far exceeds their capacity to help. Hope in Skid Row is not made of grand dreams. It comes in small forms: a warm meal, a handshake, a smile on a cold, windy morning. These don't erase poverty, but they help people here hold on to the belief that they have not been forgotten. In the bleak picture of Skid Row, among the gray shades of poverty and instability, there are still faint glimmers of light. These are places where, upon entering, the homeless can temporarily set aside the fear of being driven away, and where they can find a hot meal or a safe place to sleep. Here, survival is sustained not only by instinct, but also by the outstretched hands of the community organizations and individuals who refuse to stand still in the face of injustice. The lighthouses in this darkness are called the Midnight Mission, Union Rescue Mission, and Los Angeles Mission. These are the landmarks the homeless know by heart. Every day, long lines form for hot meals, bottles of clean water, or a set of dry clothes. Inside the temporary shelters, the steady clink of spoons on stainless steel trays mixes with the aroma of steaming soup, briefly masking the musty smell and garbage outside. But these organizations do more than keep people alive with food. They provide something even more important: the feeling of being seen and acknowledged. In a small room lit with warm yellow light, a nod of greeting or a simple inquiry about someone's health can become the thread that ties a person back to the belief that they still have a place in society. The harsh reality, however, is that the needs of Skid Row far exceed what can be met. With tight budgets, limited staff, and an ever-growing number of people needing help, these organizations are constantly overwhelmed. Every day, when the last meal is served, there are still dozens, even hundreds, who quietly walk away empty-handed. Many volunteers, often working without pay, must juggle enormous workloads, from cooking and distributing food to providing basic medical care. More than once, they've faced a painful choice: help a smaller group thoroughly, or help a larger number but only at the bare minimum. In moments like these, sustained and stable support from both the government and the wider community is no longer just a general appeal, it is a matter of survival to keep these lighthouses from going dark. Beyond emergency relief, some organizations have taken a longer step forward, creating vocational training and life skills programs. These are efforts to break the cycle of homelessness by giving Skid Row residents the chance to rebuild their lives. They teach plumbing, carpentry, cooking, electrical repair, and even personal finance management. Some students, after months of persistence, have found stable jobs, rented small rooms, and left Skid Row behind. Yet compared to the thousands who need help, these programs are still just small drops in a vast desert. Many can't take part because of illness, addiction, or simply lacking basic requirements such as identification documents. And with limited resources, organizations struggle to expand their reach enough to cover the enormous need. Still, every success story, no matter how small, carries the power to spread. One person finding a job, one breaking free from addiction, one moving into a new home. These are not only personal victories, but also proof that Skid Row is not where all hope dies. Amid the chaos of Skid Row, community and charity organizations are the final pillars keeping this ship from sinking entirely. They cannot change everything overnight, but every meal, every blanket, every vocational class they provide is an affirmation that there are still people who believe every life is worth fighting for. If Skid Row is a deep scar in the heart of Los Angeles, then housing and social welfare policies are the double-edged sword capable of healing, but also of cutting deeper. For years, authorities have attempted temporary measures, clearing out tent encampments, building a few new shelters, increasing patrols to reduce crime. On the surface, these actions create the sense that the situation is being managed. In reality, it's just sweeping dust under the rug. Without addressing the root cause, the lack of affordable housing, the flow of people being pushed onto the streets continues to pour into Skid Row. Experts agree, lasting solutions must start with strong investment in affordable housing projects. Not just a few hundred units, but thousands designed for low-income residents, paired with a comprehensive system of social support. Alongside this, improving healthcare services, mental health care, and education for impoverished communities is essential to break the cycle of homelessness, unemployment, returning to homelessness. However, the issue in Skid Row is not purely economic. It is also a story of discrimination and inequality. The majority of the homeless here are people of color, who have borne the consequences of decades of unequal access to jobs, education, and housing. Many welfare policies, though equal on paper, in practice come with invisible barriers, from bureaucratic red tape to the biases of those enforcing them, and making it harder for these vulnerable groups to gain access. To truly resolve the problem, there must be a shift in perspective, seeing the homeless not as a burden, but as citizens in need of an opportunity to stand back up. One of the key factors in escaping street life is access to reintegration programs. Yet currently, these operate with low effectiveness. The most common barrier is the lack of identification, a requirement that seems simple, but for someone who has lost their home, job, and often even their past, can be nearly impossible. Some who qualify miss out because appointments are scheduled too far away or they lack transportation. The result is that scarce opportunities go to waste, and people end up back in Skid Row exactly where they hoped to leave behind. Changing this situation requires not only government action, but also the participation of the community. Every individual can contribute, volunteering a few hours a week at a shelter, donating to aid organizations, or simply sharing information to raise awareness. When many hands come together, vocational training programs, healthcare services, and affordable housing initiatives can expand their reach and touch more lives. The opportunities exist in successful models from elsewhere, such as the Housing First program in Finland or reintegration projects in Salt Lake City. But the challenges are just as real: limited budgets, insufficient political will, and deeply rooted social prejudice. To ensure Skid Row is no longer a symbol of failure, Los Angeles needs a long-term, fair, and determined strategy, one where every policy is built on the belief that no one should have to live and die on the sidewalk. Amid the many dark tones in Skid Row's portrait, there are still bright patches, small yet enduring, painted by people who refuse to surrender to fate. Despite poverty, violence, and prejudice, quiet but steady steps forward are taking place here. Some community organizations go beyond handing out food or providing temporary shelter. They aim to fundamentally change the lives of the homeless. They open vocational classes, from cooking, carpentry, and electrical work to operating machinery, giving people who have been pushed to the margins of society a chance to learn new skills. Alongside these, life skills courses are offered, teaching personal finance management, job searching, and even how to prepare for a job interview. Addiction recovery programs are a crucial part of this journey. In Skid Row, breaking free from drugs is not just a personal decision, it's a long battle against temptation, deep psychological wounds, and the surrounding environment. Support groups for recovery hold weekly meetings where people share their stories, receive encouragement, and learn how to face difficult days without falling back into old habits. The results may not yet be reflected in impressive numbers, but on an individual level, the impact is clear. A man who had wandered the streets for years now has steady work at a small woodworking shop. A woman once addicted to fentanyl has completed restaurant service training and begun working part-time. A young man who once thought his life would end in Skid Row has rented his first small room, holding a freshly earned vocational certificate. Stories like these not only inspire others, but prove that change is possible even if it comes slowly. However, to ensure that these sparks of hope are not extinguished, greater coordination between the community, government, and private sector is needed. Local businesses can contribute by expanding job opportunities for former homeless individuals or sponsoring training programs. The government must ensure these support programs have stable funding, rather than relying entirely on donations. The community can continue to help through volunteering, donating, or simply treating the homeless with respect instead of with judgment. Hope for Skid Row is not an unrealistic dream. It lives in small but consistent actions: a blanket, a training session, a job opportunity, an encouraging word at the right moment. When these actions multiply, they can create a wave of change strong enough to push back the darkness that hangs over this place. Perhaps the most beautiful image of Skid Row's future is not a neighborhood devoid of tents, but a community where people who once lived on the streets can hold their heads high, walking their own new path with a job, a home, and the belief that they deserve a decent life like anyone else. Skid Row is not an abandoned wasteland. It is the fragile home of thousands, where each day they struggle against hunger, cold, illness, and the neglect of society. The homelessness crisis here is not just the story of unfortunate lives, it is a mirror reflecting a bitter truth. We live in a society still lacking fair and sustainable solutions to confront homelessness. It is time we see Skid Row not merely as the government's problem, but as a shared responsibility of the entire community. Temporary measures, clearing tents, opening a few shelters will never be enough to change this reality. We need long-term policies, affordable housing projects, healthcare systems, and reintegration support so that no one is left behind. And that change starts with each of us by opening our hearts through small but persistent contributions, an hour of volunteering, a donation, or simply sharing the story so that more people know about it. Share this video, join the conversation on solutions to homelessness, and don't forget to subscribe so you can continue with us in exploring the stories of communities left behind by society. Because sometimes, just telling a story or offering a compassionate glance can be the beginning of a journey that changes someone's life.